She's been rewinding destiny the whole time. Not metaphorically, not behind the scenes in a writer's room way, literally living the same era over and over, watching the same world burn in different shapes, and waking up again at the start of a familiar day like the universe just hit reset. And the scariest part isn't that it's possible, it's that it explains everything about her. Because the first time you met her, she already spoke like someone who'd lost you, not in grief, in exhaustion. She appeared, delivered a warning like a wound, and vanished before you could even ask the obvious questions. Like time itself was chasing her down a corridor and she couldn't afford to slow. She didn't sound mysterious. She sounded late. And now, standing on Europa's ice with the wind trying to peel the heat off your armor, you finally understand why. She isn't a prophet. She's a survivor of a future that keeps happening. The reason she knows what's coming is because she's watched it happen again and again, and every time the darkness wins, she gets thrown back to try one more time. By the end of this part, you'll understand 3 things: what she's trying to prevent, what rewinding actually looks like in her life, and why she picked you. Not because you're special in the way legends say, but because you're one of the few variables that ever stays unpredictable. First payoff comes fast. She is the Exo Stranger you met years ago, and she isn't showing up at key moments by luck. She's doing it because those moments are the points where a timeline breaks, or survives. She steps out of the storm like she's stepping out of a memory. Same silhouette, same stillness, same sense that she's not fully here, even when she's right in front of you. The visor hides her eyes, but not the weight behind them. You've stared down gods and watched planets break. And this still makes your spine tighten, because gods rage and planets shatter. But this woman looks like she's been carrying the same quiet disaster for longer than you've been alive. Don't follow the old rules, she tells you. It isn't advice. It's an order delivered with the tired confidence of someone who has tried every other version of the sentence and watched it fail. Europa tries to make you small. Ice horizon, endless grey, a cold that feels like it was designed to erase evidence, the kind of place that turns even your voice into something fragile. But she doesn't look fragile. She looks like a person who has already walked this path 100 times and is trying to stop herself from stepping in the same footprint again. You ask her what she wants. She doesn't answer the way people answer when they want something from you. She answers the way someone answers when they want something for you, and that "for" comes wrapped in urgency. You're going to use it, she says. The darkness, stasis, whatever you want to call it. Your ghost stiffens beside you, light tightening like a fist. The tower taught you a simple story. Light good, dark bad, end of discussion. The city survives by keeping its lines clean. But Europa doesn't care about clean lines. Europa cares about survival. And she knows that because she's seen what happens when guardians pretend the dark doesn't exist until it's already in their veins. Now, quick thanks for being here. Like and subscribe. It helps a lot. And tell me what other games or series you want lore videos for, because I'm building the next scripts around what you ask for. Back to the ice. You tell her she's asking you to cross a line. She doesn't flinch. Lines move, she says, and there's bitterness in it, like she's watched lines become graves. Then she finally gives you the kind of truth that makes your helmet feel too small. She's lived this before, not in visions, not in simulations, in blood and loss and real-time failure. She's watched guardians fall, not die, fall, into the darkness and come back wearing their old faces like masks. She's watched the city become a battlefield that never ends. She's watched hope get weaponized and used against the people who needed it most. And each time she fails to stop it, she doesn't get a funeral. She gets a restart. That's the first real gut-level meaning of rewinding. It isn't cool time travel. It's punishment disguised as possibility. It's waking up with all the grief still inside you while everyone else is still smiling because they haven't lost yet. Micro signpost, this is where she stops being mysterious and becomes tragic. Because once you accept she's been repeating this, a lot of her behavior stops being cryptic and starts being defensive. Why she never explained herself at the start. Why she always sounded like she was speaking around a deadline. Why she treats certain names like landmines. Why she watches people with the careful gaze of someone deciding whether they're about to become a friend or a future enemy. You ask her how many times. She doesn't give you a number. That's how you know it's not a story she's proud of. A number would make it feel finite. A number would make it feel like there's a last loop. But the way she holds herself suggests something worse. That she stopped counting because counting started to feel like surrender. So she tells you what she can tell you. Every loop ends in the same kind of silence. The kind you get after the last transmission cuts out. The kind you get after the last wall falls. The kind you get when the traveler's presence doesn't feel like shelter anymore, when it feels like an empty sky where a miracle used to be. And then she wakes up again, at a point far earlier than the end. Early enough to try something different, early enough to move one piece on the board before the whole game locks into its familiar, fatal shape. And each time she wakes up, she carries the same question like a shard under her skin. Where is the first domino? Because she learned the hard way that you don't stop the collapse by fighting at the end. You stop it by changing the decision that makes the end inevitable. Orientation recap, because her story can feel like fog if you don't pin it down. She has lived a future where the darkness wins. She resets to an earlier point, and she intervenes, again, trying to change the choices that lead to that ending. That's the rewind. Now the story tightens around the part that matters to you, why you're involved. Because she didn't just stumble onto you, she sought you out. Not because you're the strongest, not because you're the chosen one, not because you're destiny, because you're a problem to the Vex, to the Hive, to the Witness's entire worldview, and crucially, to her loop. You are paracausal. You don't behave like a predictable equation. You keep breaking rules that everyone else treats like physics. And in a war where the enemy is trying to force reality into one final shape, an unpredictable variable is not a luxury. It's a weapon. That's why she's here, on Europa, pushing you towards stasis with the intensity of someone who hates the idea but hates the alternative more. Because in too many of her loops, the darkness gets used against the city first, by enemies, by traitors, by desperation, and the Guardians who refuse to understand it end up getting outplayed. So she makes a brutal choice. Better to learn it, master it, bind it, than to meet it blind. That's the ethical knife edge of her entire existence. She isn't asking you to be comfortable, she's asking you to be ready. And readiness, in her experience, looks like doing the thing the Vanguard would never endorse until the city is already in flames. Now you start noticing how she moves through conversations. She doesn't argue ideology, she argues outcomes. You say, "Isn't this wrong?" She answers, "It ends us if we don't." You say, "Isn't this dangerous?" She answers, "It's already happening." That is not a person theorizing. That is a person remembering. This is where the title becomes personal. Because she's been rewinding destiny isn't just trivia. It means she carries the emotional weight of futures you will never see. It means she remembers betrayals you haven't suffered yet. It means she has mourned people who are still alive, right in front of you, smiling, trusting, unbroken. And that does something to a person. It makes them blunt. It makes them impatient. It makes them cold when warmth would be easier. Not because they don't care, because caring has become a repeated injury. You can feel it when you mention the tower. She doesn't scoff, but her silence tells you she's watched the tower fall in too many versions to treat it as permanent. She treats the city the way you treat a campfire in a storm. Essential, fragile, always one gust away from going out. And then she tells you the second payoff, the one that changes how you read the entire franchise retroactively. She hasn't been chasing a single enemy. She's been chasing a pattern. In her failures, it's not always the same face that delivers the killing blow. Sometimes it's an obvious villain. Sometimes it's a necessary decision that rots into catastrophe. Sometimes it's a victory that turns out to be a setup. But the ending is always the same kind of ending. The darkness doesn't just win a war. It rewrites what winning means until everything you fought for feels like it never mattered. That's why she's obsessed with the first domino. She's trying to find the moment where the story stops being yours and becomes theirs. So she trains you. Not like a mentor who wants to be admired, like a soldier who wants you to survive. Europa becomes a classroom carved out of ice and consequence. Every small lesson, how to hold stasis without letting it hold you, how to use it without worshipping it, feels like it's built on the bones of a failure she remembers too clearly to describe. And you realize she's not teaching you power. She's teaching you restraint, because she's seen what happens when Guardians take darkness into themselves and call it freedom, and the line between tool and identity disappears. That's the moment you finally see the difference between her and a normal time traveler in a normal story. A normal time traveler is trying to fix things. She's trying to prevent a slide. And slides are harder than explosions because you don't notice them until you're already moving. So part 1 ends with a resolved mini-arc. She has revealed the core truth. She's caught in a repeating loop of failure, and she has made her first major play in the current timeline, pushing you toward the one tool she believes can disrupt the pattern before it locks in. She's been rewinding destiny the whole time, not to change everything, to change the one decision that turns "we might survive" into "we already lost." Europa doesn't forgive footprints. The wind comes in hard and sideways, sandblasting the ice until every track you make looks like a mistake the planet wants to erase. It's the perfect place for secrets, because even the ground can't remember you for long. But she remembers. She's walking ahead of you again. Same steady pace, same refusal to look back too often, like she's afraid that if she checks whether you're still there, she'll see the version of you she lost instead. You follow her past collapsed metal ribs and half-buried corridors where Golden Age ambition froze in place. The deeper you go, the more the ice stops feeling natural. It starts feeling engineered, a lid slammed down over something humanity wasn't supposed to touch. And the closer you get, the clearer it becomes. This isn't just a training run for stasis. This is a pilgrimage to the origin of her obsession. A door yawns open in the side of a ruined facility, and the air inside is a different kind of cold. Sterile, chemical, preserved. The lights don't fully come on. They flicker and hesitate, like the building itself is unsure whether it should admit you. Your ghost floats forward, scanning, voice tight. This place, it pauses. This place is full of people who never got out. She doesn't deny it. She just keeps walking. The corridor bends into a chamber where the walls are lined with old consoles and sealed glass. Some of the panes are cracked, frosted from the inside. Some are intact, still holding darkness behind them, like the facility kept its last breath in a jar. And that's when she finally gives you something real. Not a warning, not a directive, but a confession wrapped in steel. It all began long ago, she says, not in the way storytellers say it. Not dramatic, not poetic. Like a person who has been carrying a timeline on her back and is finally letting you feel the weight for a second. This is where rewinding stops being a mystery and starts being a motive. She leads you to a terminal that still has power, still has memory. The screen glows weakly, and the lines of text feel almost indecent, like you're reading a diary that never meant to be found. Your ghost scan turns into a stunned whisper. "They made Exos from human DNA here." A simple sentence, delivered like a gunshot. Because it means everything that's always felt normal about Exos, their voices, their habits, their human mannerisms, isn't imitation. It's inheritance. She doesn't react. Not outwardly. But you see her hands flex once. Just once. Like the words brushed something sharp inside her. "People think I'm just a machine that walks between wars," she says. "They think I'm a messenger, a glitch, a prophecy." She looks at the terminal like it's a mirror that never lies. "I'm a consequence," she gestures down the corridor. "Come on." You move deeper, and the facility opens up into a larger space. Vault-like, heavy with old security doors and sealed partitions. It's the kind of architecture that screams control, not protection. Control. The belief that if you lock something down hard enough, you can own it. And for a moment, you can almost picture the Golden Age humans who built this place, calm, confident, certain that the universe was a puzzle and they were holding the instructions. Then the lights stutter again, and you remember what always happens to confident people in Destiny. They get used, or they get broken. She stops at a panel where the ice has crept in through cracks, forming a lacework of frost. Her gloved fingers hover over it, as if she expects the metal to bite. "You want to understand why I push you?" she says. "Why I won't let you stay clean." The pause is long enough to feel like a cut. "Because I've watched what happens when Guardians refuse to learn the enemy's language." She turns to face you fully now, visor reflecting your silhouette like you're already a ghost in her memory. "In some loops," she says, "you never take stasis. You keep the old rules. You stay righteous. You stay sure." Her voice goes flat. "And you still lose." You don't ask how. You don't ask where. Something in her tone makes it clear that the details aren't the point. The point is inevitability. Then she shifts just slightly, and you feel the second blade. "In other loops," she continues, "Guardians take the darkness gladly. They call it evolution. They call it freedom. They call it necessity." Her head tilts, a motion that would look curious on someone else. "They tell themselves they're still the same person." The way she says it makes your ghost go quiet. "Are they?" you ask. She doesn't answer directly. She looks away toward the sealed chamber doors, like she can still see the ghosts of old experiments behind them. "What do you think happens when power stops being a tool," she says, "and starts being your identity?" You know the answer. You've seen it in small ways. People bending too far toward the thing that scares them, then insisting the bend is just adaptation. She brings you back to Europa's core lesson without ever saying the word. Stasis isn't evil. It's not good either. It's a force that rewards control, certainty, stillness, and the human mind loves certainty. That's why it's dangerous. So the spine stays clear. She brought you here to show you two truths at once: who she is and what she's afraid you'll become. Not because she's moralizing, but because she's seen both roads end in bodies. You step forward, and she finally gives you the part you've been circling since you first met her all those years ago. She keeps waking up, not from sleep, from endings. Each time the future collapses into the same kind of ruin, something snaps her backward. The details of the mechanism are still hidden behind layers of paracausal weirdness, light, dark, all the forces that don't play by physics, but the lived experience is brutally simple. She fails, reality resets, she tries again, and every reset leaves the memories intact. That's what makes her dangerous and exhausted at the same time. She isn't making guesses. She's carrying receipts in her head that nobody else can read. You walk out of the chamber into a narrow corridor where the ceiling dips low and the floor is slick with ice. Your breath fogs the inside of your visor. She talks while walking, because standing still inside a place like this feels like inviting the past to grab your ankle. "Everyone thinks time loops are clean," she says, "like you just start over." Her voice tightens. "You don't start over, you start again. There's a difference." She stops and looks back at you. Starting over means the pain resets too. Starting again means you carry everything, every time. You feel something cold and human behind her metal shell. "How many?" you ask. She pauses, and you can tell the number, whatever it is, has teeth. "I stopped counting when the counting became a ritual," she says. "When I realized the numbers weren't helping me fight, they were just helping me grieve." That's the most honest thing she's said yet. And now the pieces begin to click together in a way that changes how you read her whole presence in the story. She doesn't do speeches because she's already tried speeches. She doesn't do comfort because comfort made her hesitate. She doesn't tell you everything because she knows what people do with knowledge. They turn it into certainty, and certainty is how the universe punishes you. This is where you finally see her as a strategist, not a mystic, because she's not trying to save everyone. She's trying to move the right pieces at the right times with the smallest possible changes that produce the biggest possible survival. That's why she focuses on decision points. The moment you choose to wield stasis or reject it. The moment you decide whether darkness is a forbidden word or a tool you can master. The moment you treat your enemies as simple villains instead of systems that learn. She leads you out of the facility again, back into the Europa storm. The sky is a flat, brutal grey. And now that you've seen the place where Exos were made, where human minds were cut loose from human bodies, you understand her in a new way. She lives every loop with a mind that remembers too much in a body that can't forget. No wonder she's sharp. No wonder she's distant. No wonder she sounds like she's always running out of time. Because in a sense, she is. Every loop gives her time. Every loop takes something away. You make your way across the ice toward a distant ridge that overlooks a fallen settlement, ruined structures like ribs rising from snow. In the distance, you can see traces of another conflict. Fallen tech, broken banners, the remnants of someone else's dream of power. She slows there, standing at the edge like she's waiting for a specific thought to catch up with you. "Do you know why I chose you?" she asks. You start to answer with the obvious: strength, luck, reputation. She cuts it off. "No," she says, "not that." She lets the wind scream between you, like punctuation. "I chose you because you're a variable." You feel the phrase settle. A variable. Not a hero, not a chosen one. A problem the universe can't solve cleanly. "Machines hate variables," she continues, and for a moment you think of Mercury, the infinite forest, a million simulated wars collapsing toward a single preferred outcome. Gods hate them too. She looks up, toward the sky, toward the traveler's distant presence you can't see from here, but can always feel as a pressure on the soul. "In some loops, you become predictable," she says softly. "You become the story everyone expects you to be. The brave guardian, the righteous weapon, the unstoppable answer." Her voice hardens. And that's when the enemies learn how to use you. That's the trap she's been trying to steer you away from. Not death, not defeat, but being made into a function. Being made into something the witness, something obsessed with a final shape, can account for. Now, she finally says the part that's been hanging over Europa since the first time you saw stasis crystallize in someone else's hands. Eramis, she says. The name lands like a marker on a map. Not because Eramis is the biggest villain in the cosmos, but because she's a domino, a decision point with teeth. A moment the timeline tends to break around. She takes power she shouldn't have, the stranger says. She offers it to others. She makes it look simple. You can hear the disgust in her restraint, not rage, disgust, like she's watched the same temptation claim the same people more than once. And in too many futures, she adds, guardians react the same way. Your ghost floats closer to you, quietly. What way? It asks. The stranger answers without looking at your ghost. They either refuse to learn, or they embrace it without discipline. She turns slightly, and her visor catches the storm light. Both roads get people killed! This is her core philosophy, stripped of all mystery. The danger isn't stasis. The danger is what humans do with certainty. Refusal is certainty. Addiction is certainty. Discipline is the narrow path that feels awful because it requires you to stay awake while the universe tries to lull you into an easy answer. If you thought she rewinds time was the whole twist, here's the deeper one. She's not rewinding to win faster. She's rewinding to keep you from becoming the weapon the enemy needs. She steps closer, now, voice lower, like she doesn't want the snow to overhear. In the Dark Age, she says, people thought survival was about weapons, food, walls. She gestures vaguely at the frozen ruins, at the dead technology. But survival has always been about choices. She taps her temple once, and memory makes choices heavier. You notice how carefully she says memory, like it's both gift and curse. She has it. You don't. Not the way she does. And that's the final cruel irony. She's trying to save a timeline by teaching people who can't remember their last lives to remember their mistakes anyway. She looks at your hands. Show me, she says. You already know what she means. The darkness inside you isn't a voice. It's a pressure. A kind of quiet invitation to stop struggling and start controlling, to freeze the messy parts of reality until they stop moving. You let it rise, carefully. You don't surrender to it. You don't pretend it's harmless. You take it like you'd take a knife from someone else's hand, with respect for what it can do. Stasis blooms. A cold so sharp, it feels like a thought made solid. And for a second, you feel the danger she's been warning you about, how good it feels to make chaos obey. She watches you the way a doctor watches a patient swallow medicine that could also be poison. Again, she says. You do it again, and this time you hold the line a little better. Not tighter, better. You treat it like a thing you command, not a thing you worship. She nods once. Approval, but cautious. Like she's seen approval become a trap too. Good, she says. Now listen. The wind rises, and her voice becomes the only steady thing in it. I don't need you to be pure, she says. I need you to be present. She steps back and looks out over Europa's frozen wasteland. Because if you fall asleep inside your own certainty, this timeline ends the same way the others did. That's the mini-arc Part 2 resolves. She's shown you why her push towards stasis is not corruption, it's counterplay. Not against the darkness itself, but against the pattern that keeps turning guardians into predictable pieces. And she leaves you with one last truth that feels like a warning carved into ice. I can't stop the rewind, she says quietly. Then she looks at you again, and the weight returns. But you might be able to change what happens before it. She isn't fearless, she's disciplined. There's a difference. Fearless people run at problems, like they're trying to outrun the feeling. Disciplined people move like they've already learned what panic costs, and she moves like someone who has paid that cost more times than she can admit. You stand there with stasis still humming under your skin, cold enough to make your thoughts feel sharper, dangerous enough to make your ego feel hungry, and you wait for her to tell you what comes next. She doesn't. She watches you instead, not like a teacher testing a student, but like a person trying to see whether you've become the version she keeps waking up to regret. Again, she says, simple. You raise your hand and let the power rise. This time, you don't chase the feeling of control. You don't indulge the satisfaction of freezing chaos into obedience. You treat stasis like a blade, useful, precise, and eager to slip if you get careless. The ice blooms, holds, and fades on your command, not because you're stronger, because you're awake. That earns you the smallest nod she's given you yet. Barely there, like she refuses to let relief become superstition. Good, she says. Now listen. She steps to the edge of the ridge where the wind can't resist her silhouette. Europa stretches below. Ruins, snow, distant structures that look like history tried to stand back up and couldn't. She gestures to it all like it's a diagram. This is where it always starts, she says. Not with the final battle, not with the big speech, with someone taking power and calling it necessary. You think of Aramis without her saying the name again. You think of how quickly desperation can dress itself in righteousness. How easy it is to believe you're the exception. She turns her visor toward you. In the loops where you lose, she says, it's never because you weren't brave. Her voice tightens, almost annoyed at how often people misunderstand this part. It's because you became predictable. That lands like a punch, because you know what predictable looks like in a universe full of enemies that learn. Predictable is a path worn into the snow. Predictable is a ritual. Predictable is the moment you stop making choices and start repeating yourself. You want to know what rewinding feels like? She asks. You don't answer. You don't need to. It feels like watching people you care about walk toward cliffs they can't see, she says, and realizing you've already screamed this warning in other versions of their lives. And it didn't work. For a beat, the stranger is just a person in an exo body, standing in a storm with a voice that won't let itself shake. Then she does something she almost never does. She softens the truth instead of sharpening it. I don't need you to be perfect, she says. I need you to be deliberate. Deliberate. Not pure, not righteous, not untainted. Deliberate. She steps closer, and you can feel the pressure of her entire impossible history compress into a single instruction. When you use it, she says, glancing at your hand as if she can see the stasis inside you, you do it because you chose to, not because you're angry, not because you're scared, not because it feels good. The wind rises again, and her voice nearly gets swallowed, but the next words cut through anyway. Because the moment it feels like identity, you've already started losing. You breathe out slowly. You look down at your hands. You think about all the times the universe has asked you to become something simpler than a person. Weapon, symbol, answer. You think about how easy it would be to accept that role. And you understand why she's been rewinding. She isn't trying to save a world by winning a war. She's trying to save a world by stopping a pattern. You lift your head. So, what am I to you, you ask? A variable? She doesn't hesitate. Yes. It should feel insulting. It doesn't. Not anymore. Because a variable means you can change the equation. A variable means you can do something the Vex can't lock down, the Hive can't starve into obedience, and the Witness can't file into a final shape. A variable means you still have choices. She holds that silence for a moment, then gives you the closest thing to a promise she allows herself. If this timeline survives, she says, it won't be because you were stronger than the darkness. She turns slightly, looking out over Europa like she's staring at a future she's afraid to imagine. It'll be because you refuse to become what it expected. And with that, the mini-arc resolves cleanly. You're not being recruited into her certainty. You're being trained against it. She's been rewinding because she knows the enemy doesn't just kill worlds, it teaches people to repeat the same mistakes until the ending feels inevitable. You won't give it that comfort. She steps back, and the distance returns. Not coldness, just boundaries. Then she says one last thing, quiet enough that it feels like it's meant for her as much as for you. Don't make me meet you again as someone else. And she walks into the storm. Not disappearing like a magic trick. Leaving like a soldier who's done what she came to do, move one piece, keep the board from locking, and trust a variable to do what it does best.